Welcome everyone. I'm very, very pleased to have this opportunity to introduce Michelle. Michelle Fury, who's the founder and owner of Rhythms Yoga Training, is a licensed professional counselor and a certified yoga therapist. She's also the author of Using Yoga Therapy to Promote Mental Health in Children and Adolescents. She was named by the International Association of Yoga Therapists the first full-time yoga therapist in a hospital setting for her work co-founding the yoga therapy program at Children's Hospital Colorado. She combines her clinical mental health experience and yoga expertise in her private practice and in yoga therapy trainings nationally and internationally. Lastly, she's an assistant professor of behavioral health at the Community College of Denver. When she's not teaching, she can be found biking or gardening. And we're here to discuss her most recent book, Yoga Therapy for Complex Trauma. You see all my notes. It's a wonderful read. I've learned a lot during this process. So, Michelle,
Yes.
would you like to begin with a special opportunity for us to learn from you?
Yes. And I want to let folks know, since anyone who's attended our other amazing interviews knows we do a little experiential to just to help ourselves ground and really enter into the space together. And today I'm going to take a little extra time. So probably your nervous systems are entrained to, oh, it's going to last for this amount of time. We're going to go a little bit longer because I really want us to have a lived experience, a visceral experience before we dive into conversation. And in that way, we can really integrate. So, two things. I'm going to use my bells. If you're listening to the recording and you can't hear it, my apologies. We tested it out. It sounded good at the beginning, but allow yourself to just open to sound. So, whether or not you can hear the bell fading, allow your attention to come to sound, noticing all the ambient sounds around you. You may hear the sound of traffic, obviously, the sound of my voice, maybe the air in the vents in your own home, a clock ticking, or people moving. So allow these sounds to be as they are. As we know, we're not trying to edit anything out in our experience. We're just allowing this present moment and our experience of it to come to the foreground. So it's like we're walking across a threshold from the room of our mind, of the worries, the to-do list, the regrets, whatever just happened, and we're walking across this threshold into this present moment. First, using sound to bring ourselves present. And then I allow you to bring your attention to the three touch points of first the feet. Just notice what the soles of your feet are touching. And then allow the attention to come up to the sitting bones, the second touch point. Noticing how gravity helps stabilize you, support you. And then lastly, noticing the touch point of either your back up against the back of a surface or the length of your spine. And then from that place of kinesthetic awareness, I invite you to bring your attention to your breath. You don't need to do anything with your breathing. Just notice that you are breathing. Noticing that as you inhale, there's that opening, lifting, expansive quality to inhale. And as you exhale, there's a grounding, rooting, dropping quality to exhale. Further back, allow your attention to come to places in your body where you feel tension. Notice there are these places of tension or maybe even pain. But as you go further back, you may also notice there are places in your body that feel just fine. It could be your left pinky finger, it could be your right shoulder, your earlobes, but bring your attention to a place in your body that feels just fine. It could be neutral or it could be even good, relaxed, light, open. This safe space in your body is a place that you can return to anytime you feel distraught, dysregulated, upset, knowing that within your own system there is a space that is open, receptive, just okay. It's a great way to feel. Bringing your attention to this spot and just breathing into this place in your own body, your own system. Notice in just the few moments that we've been becoming present how you feel different now than you did before we began. And then we'll come back together.
Thank you, Michelle, for that beautiful practice. You and I have talked about the concept of space. In my own work, I talk a lot about sacred space and safe space. And one of the things I noted in reading your book was that you make a distinction between a safe space and a safe place.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting to me, and I was wondering if you might expand on that.
Yeah, I would be happy to. It's so funny. Like, once you write your book, you kind of let it go into the universe. And so when you brought that up the other day, I'm like, oh, that's right. I haven't talked about that in a long time to any of my clients. So I realized, oh, that would be nice to make that distinction. So we know a lot, especially for those of us who have a trauma-informed practice, that safe place tends to refer to creating, help our clients or ourselves create a visualization where we feel safe. And usually it's a place we've been to, a beach, a mountain, your grandma's kitchen, it could be anywhere, but it's a safe place, like a location in the world and materiality. Although safe space is also materiality. The difference is safe space, the way I've been taught, is both the container that we create with our clients, where we feel safe, the client feels safe, and in the visualization or the body scan really that we just did, we're looking at that safe space within our own bodies, within our own system. And what I find is that you use them differently. You don't use, you don't have to use both. With every single client we see, we do want to create safe space. We want to make sure that it's a container for both of us, or for all of us if it's a group. But some clients will use safe place and others we will not. And how do you decide on that? A lot of times it depends on, can that person visualize? Because we now know there's people who can't visualize. And so it can feel very negating and invalidating. If you ask them to visualize, they don't know how to do that. I had a client for years who she didn't tell me until years, hey, Michelle, I can't visualize. I was like, oh no. So we don't want to do a visualization of imagine being on a beach, in the sand, if they can't visualize, because it's not going to be helpful for them. But for every single client, we want to create that safe space between us. And sometimes what I did with you all in this body scan is sometimes you really want the client to feel that safe space within themselves. And so in the book, I mentioned a client where their body felt very safe to them, unsafe to them. And so when we started doing sun salutations, Devin could tap into oh, now I feel my shoulder, and now I feel my elbow, and now I feel my hips. And that the fact that their awareness was transitory, they would go from one place of awareness to another, really created safe space for them.
Yeah, I can see what that would be especially important with the the community that you address in this book.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you talked about the fact that some people they don't feel safe in their environment. And so how important it is for you to help them find some kind of safety within themselves.
Yeah,
Mm,
yeah, yeah. And
yeah.
sometimes for some clients, they actually find the safety with you before they can find it within themselves. Definitely with Devin, that was the case where it was only it's been so long, but it was weeks and maybe months before we even started to talk about finding that space within their body because it wasn't safe for them before then.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. I thought that was really important. It's something that certainly I had not considered exactly that way. So, um, and I think that you've pretty much talked about this, about when you use each one, why you know, I think we've kind of covered that, why you would use each of those with a certain client. Some people it would be more of an internal space, some people would be more of an external space.
Yeah, and we could almost have safe space A and B because there's A, which is with every single client we see, whether they have trauma or not, right? We're going to create that safe container, that safe space. That's
Hmm.
A. We need to do that with everyone. Um, but then safe space B is them finding it within themselves. And there's some clients we'll do that with if it's appropriate. If they've had a sex assault or if they've for whatever reason, traumas of all sorts can create lack of safety in the body. It doesn't have to be a sex assault. But for some people to start, it's a brave thing to begin to find that like left pinky finger feels safe. That can feel extremely empowering. Wow, I hadn't realized my pinky is just fine, Um, so for them that's a great thing. And then for other people who are visualizers, there's many clients who love to do visualizations, and so that safe place is a really great thing. And so you just want to make sure before you do visualization to ask clients, hey, can you visualize? And people know, or if they don't, you can find out. You can run an experiment, and that can feel empowering too.
Thanks, Michelle. So tell us, why did this book need to be written and why the world needed this book?
Yeah, yeah. So for a while, it's been well researched that we're in an epidemic of mental health crisis for kids and teens around the world. I mean, as early as 2000, there were studies about this, and I can't remember when the WHO study, the World Health Organization meta-analysis came out about depression worldwide. It was definitely by the time I was at Children's, so 2006, we knew this was a problem for all humans, depression in particular. But now, since 2010, 2015, this global crisis for kids and children, that's been so well documented. And so we've seen a lot of books now that are yoga therapy for either kids or teens. I mean, a lot of your work, Louise, that you've done, work that Shani's done. I mean, many people have looked at yoga therapy with a trauma informed lens. But what I wasn't seeing was a book for the lifespan. And I also wanted to really look at it from different viewpoints, not just my own. So when it first occurred to me, wow, I really want to write this book, I thought about an edited book. But at the time, I was working with Ayala Homosani, who is my co author now. And I was supervising her on cases, and just the way she would talk about her work, I was like, that's really trauma informed what you're doing there. And she got excellent training at the Minded Institute that has that infused in all students learning. But I could really feel some simpatico with Ayala. Um, and so I said, hey, would you want to work on this with me? And it was new for her to really be doing it explicitly. But it was a really great collaboration. And so, one, I wanted to do yoga through the lifespan. Ayala has a very different lens. She has, her background, she's worked more with kids with special needs in a way that I haven't in the same way. Also, she has a background, her own personal background was in war trauma, where mine was more domestic, our personal stories. And so it felt important to just have these different viewpoints. It's not all the viewpoints on complex trauma, but just to have those different lenses felt really important and something I hadn't seen done. And then you pointed out to me the fact that we really focus on self care. This was something that was very important to Ayala and me, having been in this field as long as I have, both yoga therapy and mental health for kids and teens. I noticed there was a lack of caring for the caregiver, and it felt really important. So, that, as you know, is infused in the book.
Yeah. And I was just curious about this, about what it was like to collaborate with someone. We had an interesting discussion last time about we had two authors, and I've never done that. I was wondering what are the challenges, and I know we didn't talk about this question before, so I'm throwing it at you, but what are
Yeah.
the challenges and advantages of working with a co-author?
Yeah, it's very it's challenging for sure. Um because you have different styles, you have different understandings of how things are done. And so one of the things I would say if anyone's thinking about doing that is to make sure that you set you have some sort of agreement of how it's going to work before you sign the contract with the publisher. And of course, some people self publish. By the way, we will take questions and comments at the end. So if you
I
can.
have never been to one before. I
Oh, no,
apologize for not knowing the
quite all
frame.
right. It's quite all right. Yeah. But please make sure you write it down so that we can come back to it. Um, so it's, it's challenging to write a book, period, as you all know. And it is definitely a bigger thing. And now that Heather has come on, I'll just mention, like, I had thought about doing an edited book and figured that would be much harder. It'd be like herding cats to try to have several authors. Um, and so my own experience, of course, is just with two of us. And it was a lot. It was a lot to take on. Um, However, the fact that we got this thing to the finish line is like kudos to both of us. Like it's a lot. Um, but I think, yeah, having agreements ahead of time is a really good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle.
Yeah.
So I noticed when I was reading the book that the theme of rhythm came up about the idea of trauma disrupting rhythm and also creating rhythm. And so I was struck by that, and I wonder if you could explore that concept a little more.
Yeah, so when Louise brought this up the other day when we were doing our little prep for the interview, I was just so delighted to hear how that was a golden thread that came through so clearly. In my own work, I found that this is essential. And actually, in my own personal life, what yoga gave me as a young person when I was 19, 20 was a rhythm of practice, right? And so that's where I first discovered the importance of it, but I didn't have a name for it back then. And I didn't have a name for it for decades. And it wasn't till the pandemic that Bessel van der Kolk, who is, of course, a pioneer of both trauma research and himself, a psychiatrist, he pointed out that rhythm is the essence of life. That from the time we're babies, we are as parents, we have to like train that child how to like sleep and how to eat. These are not inborn rhythms. And that's exactly where trauma can start to occur if there's enough chaos. You don't even have to have a parent who's the stereotypical what we think of as abusive, but if that parent is really embroiled in having like three jobs and a chaotic relationship, this is going to impact the child. we used to have this feeling or this understanding that, well, kids don't remember what happened. Oh, yes, they do. And not only that, the younger you are, the less disturbance in those rhythms you need. And so we know that about trauma, we know that about human life. And what yoga does is infused in it is rhythm. Again, when we have the rhythm of our practice, the routine of our practice, when we know we're supposed to have our mat in the same place, we use as much as possible the same clothes, same time of day. As yoga therapists or any kind of yoga professional, when we're working with our clients, we know how important it is to have regularity of practice with them and to show up not just on time but early so that we can help instill those rhythms. When we start with a client, we might start with something like 5 4 3 2 1 mindfulness, where 5 things you see and 4 things you feel, using the 5 senses. And then we want to keep that ritual in there every single time. There's little things that I'll ask, like every session I'll ask clients, what were your highs and lows? Or do you want to jump into your agenda? And clients get so used to hearing that from me that they start, I don't even have to ask them. They say, well, my highs and lows for this week were, and those little rhythms are essential for healing and trauma, but also, again, going back to that safe container, that trust that we're building, that foundation of trust has a lot to do with the rhythms that we create.
Yeah, I really have noticed that in my work, and that's why I was so struck by it in your book, about the importance of like consistency and ritual, especially with some of the children that we work with or individuals that we work with,
Oh, yeah.
uh, the importance of having a sort of framework that everything fits into. So,
Yeah, as you're saying that, I mean, for you especially, like you've, spent your career doing many things, but like really focusing on kids with diversity, neurodiversity, right? With the
mhm.
autism, and even if it's not autism per se, say it's, ADHD, that's still a form of neurodiversity. Having rhythm with those kids is essential, right? Having them out in the same place and holding things for the same count. And if you change that, being so explicit about now we're going to do something new, right? And, forecasting that to make sure you don't have a tantrum. And sometimes you will have a tantrum, right? Not you, but the client, of course.
Maybe me too.
Well, exactly. I was going to say, actually, that's true.
Yeah, 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 thanks, Michelle. Yeah, sometimes just a little change can throw everything into chaos. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, whenever we can, forecasting. Yeah.
So, what distinguishes your book from others that are of a similar nature?
Yeah. One is, of course, that the lifespan, that once I left Children's, I was at Children's Hospital Colorado for 15 years. Once I left there, I went into private practice, and it was so much fun to start working with adults. And
Hmm.
what I discovered is like, well, of course, our childhoods follow us. I knew that, but I didn't know it the way I learned once I started working with adults. And it made me so grateful that I'd worked with kids because I could see that. And so in the book, it felt really important to have these three different segments of school age children, 5 to 12, adolescents, 13 to 18, and then adult. And so the book is really divided into those three developmental areas. Obviously there's overlap, but then the self-care in each section, in every single chapter, that I think is, other books definitely talk about it, but ours really goes into some detail about it. um, I have to take a look to what else is different. I have to say, our our graphic designer, Amanda, did such a gorgeous job that I feel like that is part of what is so special about our book. Is her illustrations are so playful and elegant.
Hmm.
So I really love that. And as you and I had talked about, like we integrated a dance movement therapy um, approach called the fundamental movements. And I've seen that in articles. I've seen other yoga therapists talk about the fundamental movements and how they align with yoga therapy and even with the Panchamaya model. But I hadn't seen it in a book. So I think that's pretty different as well.
Yeah. Well, I told you, I love that part. And the illustrations are there. And it's interesting because, a lot of times I was thinking about that with, especially with individuals with neurodivergent, the simplicity of the illustrations and the sort of flowing movement of them, it just feels like consistent with everything else in the book.
That's awesome. And of course, with neurodiversity, like having a picture that you can look at, and this is just, this is actually not mine. Is this? Oh, yeah, this is actually from Amy Wheeler. This is hers. So we also drew from other incredible
Mhm.
yoga therapists. That's her model. So that's not our, I was going to see if I could find a cute little thing. So there's just lots of different illustrations that are very
Just,
helpful.
yeah, right.
Yeah, we're going to
That's
show.
the same page I was coming to.
Oh, how
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah, because they're so simple and yet you can feel the movement in the illustration, but the simplicity of them makes it very easy on the eye. So I really appreciated that.
The one other thing about the simplicity is we felt very strongly that we wanted to make sure that it was clear as a human body, but that it was open to all. So, regardless of your race, your age, your ability, you could relate with these pictures and see yourself in it, because that's what we've heard a lot, right?
Mhm.
From people of that are not the majority, that, well, it doesn't look like me. So, we wanted to make sure that these look like humans and everyone could relate with them.
Mhm. Well done. So I'm curious about, well, who the book is for. I mean, I think that's somewhat clear even by the title, but if it's found a home with any unexpected audiences.
Yeah. Um, so it's definitely, we say it pretty explicitly from, I can't remember if it's the introduction or the first chapter where we start using the acronym YP for yoga professional.
Mhm.
And I was very mindful about wanting to use that term because even though this is a book about yoga therapy, there's many yoga teachers who, given the nature of their work, really are doing therapy level work. They just don't have that title or whatever. And so we wanted it to be very clear that it's for yoga professionals of all, you know, stars and stripes and whatnot. But then it's also for other, behavioral health, mental health professionals and teachers, like school teachers, um, and even first responders could gain from this, and parents for sure. And that was something I really wanted to be have. I wanted this book to be much more accessible. I felt like my first book was so academic, and that's something that the field was needing at that time. A friend of mine, actually Terry Davis, who read this book, this current book from beginning to end, she was our main reader. Um, she's a professor, and I said to her, Terry, that first book was so just like academic. Like I'd have parents say, "Ooh, that book's too intense for me, Michelle. I don't want to, that's not for me." And so we really wanted to make sure, both Ayala and I, that this book was accessible. And so really a parent could use this with their kiddo with neurodiversity.
Mhm.
And we wanted it to be that accessible.
Yeah, I think you definitely accomplished that.
Yay. Glad.
So, what about, for the many people who are in attendance are authors, and certainly others are readers, but I was wondering about uh, the writing process for you, what it was like, if there were any surprises.
Yeah, right. Oh my gosh. I think from book one to book two, taking on a book is a big thing. And if you've written a book before, you know that. But I really had this feeling this was going to be easier. And that's why I'm laughing so hard. Like, that was the biggest surprise is nope. Mm-mm. This was pretty hard to write. Totally worth it. Like, I wouldn't change it for the world, but dang, it was challenging. Yeah.
Yeah. And how about, did you find that you learned some things about yourself or about your subject in the process of writing the book?
Oh, yeah. I mean, in my first book, like when I was writing about these different illnesses and I'd gotten to chronic illness, and I know I'm going back a bit, but it relates to this book. Um, when I was writing that first book, when I got to chronic illness, I got the sickest I've been as an adult in my life. So, in other words, as I was writing about that topic of chronic illness, and I didn't end up with a chronic illness, thank goodness, but I had pneumonia and bronchitis at the same time. I mean, many people get, but I was really ill for like 6 weeks. And so, in the same way with this book, it was on complex trauma. Um, and the pieces that I had not digested, one of my present teachers, Chase Bozart of Yoga Well, says that trauma is under, or any wound is undigested material. And man, I found out what parts of me were not yet, what wounds were not yet digested. And I definitely felt like I went through it. And I was so grateful for the yoga practices and for my meditation practice because I felt like it helped me just recognize it as what it is, undigested material that just needed to be processed.
Yeah.
I can see the look on your face. Like, so Louise, Anne, and I have spoken about, like, dang, if only people knew how hard this is to write this book,
I know.
right? Like, it's really hard. And you need to do it. Like, if it's in you and it needs to come out, you need to write that book. But wow.
Yeah. I started referring to my second book as that blank book. I can't say the expletive I used.
Yes, yes, absolutely. That blank book.
So, let's see. Yeah, I think you've kind of answered this, but I just want to address it because it's such an important part of your book about how much time you spend taking care of your reader. In every chapter, you give your reader a chance to decompress and, and process. And I thought that was, I thought that was unique and especially important for this topic.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was, of course, completely intentional that when we are working with a client, um, and helping them process their trauma, we know we need to do it in little bite-sized chunks and then return to the present moment. And so that and yoga does that. That's the thing. I still don't feel like it's fully, like we fully explored as a field, or that the field of trauma understands how tailor made yoga is for trauma. That we do the same thing with our yoga practice. Our meditation teachers, like I have a yoga mentor. That's something I love about yoga, is that we are always a student, right? We're never like are the master without it. No, we are a student. And so my meditation mentor, she gives me my tools in little bite-sized chunks and then sees how is it landing. We can't be there right next to the reader as they're reading this. So to have these places where the person's just going to stop, and hopefully that gives people permission, if they're halfway through the chapter and they read a story that boom brought something up, that then they get in the rhythm of like, oh yeah, I should probably stop right now and do a practice or take a break or have some water.
Yeah, appreciate that. And that reminder, I think it doesn't matter if you've been teaching yoga for, in my case, 45 years, you still need to be reminded periodically to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I really appreciated that.
Yeah.
And I was hoping that you, in the writing process, were doing a lot of self-care as well. You did mention the importance of that.
Yes, I did. It was actually really good because, you know, it's so easy to want to just plow through. And that's definitely of like when we think about the doshas, like, man, I am so pitta, I'm fire. And it's easy for me to like plow through. So there were times like I went to the I'm trying to remember if I was done with the book. No, it all gets sort of like one big blob. And so I can't remember when it was, but like I went to Sitar, Ayala and I finally got to meet in person, which I felt like was really important. Because, by the way, one of the things that made it challenging is Ayala's in London, I'm in Colorado. And so trying to write a book at two, like almost like opposite time zones, that was interesting. So it was good to actually meet in person. That's not a break per se because we went to Sitar, but it was important. And then I took some trips, some little road trips on my own as well. Or sometimes, like towards the end of the writing, I think it got to be like August, and the book was due in October. Oh, that's right, on Halloween. And so I remember it was late August, and I had a bunch of stuff I had to do on the book. And instead, I said, you know what? I'm going for a bike ride. And so I went up to the mountains because it's my favorite thing in the world to go up to the mountains and bike in the mountains. And so, yeah, definitely did some self care along the way, as well as my meditation practice, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, what is the number one thing you think gets a lot of times gets misrepresented about this subject?
Yeah. Even like period with it doesn't matter what, you're a yoga therapist or like a talk therapist. The thing that's misunderstood is that trauma, PTSD, and the way it's defined in our DSM 5 is not the same thing as complex trauma. And whereas internationally, there is an understanding and an actual official formal definition of complex trauma in the ICD, International Classification of Diseases. Our companion to that, the DSM, here in the States, we don't have a definition of it. So there's still a big misunderstanding that single incident trauma, PTSD, is not the same thing as CPTSD or complex trauma. And so we spend the first chapter really distinguishing. We're so lucky that Judith Herman, who wrote one of the very first manuals on trauma, period, she was advocating with the DSM committee back in like the early 1990s. We need to have a separate definition. And so I see this come up with I'm not kidding you, like every single client that I see that has trauma, when I say to them, what you've described to me is trauma, to a person, they say, no, 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 that's not trauma. Because they have this like stereotypical idea in their head of what it is. Oh, I had to be abused at this level. I had to be hit like this many times. But we know neglect is every bit as harmful as out and out abuse. And that even that going back to that rhythm, when there's breaks in rhythm of care, so it doesn't even have to look like what we think neglect will look like. It could be breaks, intermittent care, where sometimes I get it and sometimes I don't. Um, that can cause trauma, complex trauma.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. I was something else that I noticed I was reading more last night, and again, I'm just throwing this one at you, Michelle. Um, so when I was in graduate school, I became a reading specialist, and I was very fortunate to have a professor. This was back in the 70s, who talked to us about not using labels
Mhm.
and the limitation of labels. And so
Yes.
that was a very, that was a huge gift that she gave me. This was long before I even had a yoga practice. And you talk about the vocabulary, enlarging the vocabulary of healing.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really wonderful. And I was hoping you would explore that a little bit with us about using the koshas, the gunas, and the fundamental movements.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And oh gosh, now I can't. She's in our group, Mara Lisa Sullivan.
Yes. Hmm.
I want to, give credit where credit is due. It was reading her book on yoga therapy, um, where this was, I first had this like, oh my gosh, that's what I've been doing. So Mara Lisa talks about how we can use the language of the Panchamaya, the five, layers or five aspects of our human existence to depathologize. And so this became very important for me and Isla to really very clearly say, this is what we're doing. We're trying to give another language. And I feel like you're saying, Louise, like a lot of us do this in our work. You do it. I know Shawnee does it. Like in conversations I've had with all of you, with Sherry, like I've had so many conversations with each and every one of you where we're talking about how do we come away from the labels. And words are useful, but they're just concepts, right? They're not, they shouldn't be fixed. And as humans, we are a system that's constantly changing. And the the language of the gunas, that understanding that things are always shifting. The gunas are all about the fact that everything is in flux all the time in materiality. When we're able to use this language skillfully, the yoga language of the gunas and the panchamaya and even the fundamental movements, it frees us from those labels that tend to silo. This is a term we use a lot in the medical field, of silos of mental health versus physical health. We want to break those silos, and this language of yoga helps to do that.
Right. That was so important about somebody maybe struggling with depression, instead of having to feel like there's something wrong with them, can just talk about having an excess of tamas.
Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. And when we start to see ourselves that way, and by we, I mean us and our clients, it is liberating. Yeah. Like when I recognize, as I mentioned earlier, like I've got pitta in me, like that's the doshas, not the gunas per se, but like I have a lot of rajas if we were going to use the language of the gunas. Um, and I've always had this joke that I don't do yoga because I already have patience. I do yoga because I was impatient, as a young person, and I need to like balance that on out. And so then it takes away, like someone can understand their anxiety as an excess of rajas, and they can understand, like you're saying, when my body doesn't feel like moving, the system has shut down and I'm unmotivated. It doesn't mean you're depressed and will be like that forever. It actually does mean that, but it means there's too much tamas. And how do we balance? How do we balance into that more sattva? That, and not also, we know in yoga, like we can have a spiritual bypass where people are like, everything's fine, and that's, an excess of sattva. We want to balance everything out.
Yeah. Yeah. And we also talked a lot about this importance of staying in your own lane,
Mhm.
and how empowering that is. And so I was hoping you would expand on that concept, because that was very important in your book as well.
Yes, yeah. So I love that you say stay in your own lane because that's very understandable. So in our field, of course, of yoga therapy, of whatever, of understanding your scope of practice, it actually is very empowering. Um, Early on, when I was doing trainings, there was a doctor, like she's a medical doctor, and she said, "Yeah, I would feel like I just never know enough." And we have a lot of that, right? That feeling of imposter syndrome, but you can shift it and turn it on its head where it gives you clarity and it allows you to set boundaries in the appropriate way. Like as a yoga therapist, I hear a lot about medications people are on. I hear a lot about their diet, but I am neither a nutritionist nor am I a psychiatrist. And so being able to say that clearly, like, oh, I have a really great colleague who could tell you how to work with your diet, since that's not my lane. And I've got this great, homeopathic referral if you want to find out what herbs would help you, or, even psychiatrists if that's what someone wants, needs. So, yeah, if we can use our scope of practice to stay in our own lane in that way, it's very empowering. Like, this is what I can give you, this is what I have to offer you. Um, it's really super important.
And you and I talked about that, how too, when we do that, we sort of set an example for our clients.
Mhm. Right, exactly, because there's that role confusion sometimes. And when I say, "Oh, wow, yeah, I can't say anything about that melatonin you're taking or that, gabapentin," but go talk to this person. That it's like we role model. You don't have to be everything to everyone.
Mhm.
And a lot of times our clients are feeling that way, whether they're a kiddo or an adult. Like we live in a culture where you're just supposed to wing it. I had a student writing about this in an essay about, because that's my other role, but it's great to see people writing. And this student was saying, like, we live sort of in a power through it society where even if you don't know something, just guesswork it. And that is not yoga, like at all. So it can help role model. You don't need to know it all, and you can't know it all as a human.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so, we all hope that our readers will get something from our books. And I was just wondering if you have, some special wish that your readers will take away from this book.
Yeah. It's amazing. It was really lovely to hear your reflections, Louise, because I realized those were some of the things the golden threads that I would really hope that people come away with is the golden thread of rhythm, of how powerful rhythm is for us and for our clients, and to not separate it out that when we create this container with a client, that we are in it too. We, as the therapist, the yoga professional, the parent, the whatever your role is, and that we have to take care of ourselves. It's so vital. And that art of connection. So just a little shameless plug here. Tomorrow, because it is tomorrow, I'm doing a seminar for the Minded Institute called The Art of Connection. And so if you want to hear more about like how to create that connection, I strongly suggest you attend that. Aaron has just put it in the chat. It's tomorrow, Wednesday, March 25th. If you're here in the States, it's my time. Well, I'll say Eastern because I feel like most people know that. It would be 2 p.m., 2:30 p.m. Eastern time, Eastern Standard. It's in the evening if you're over in the UK or Europe. And then that seminar, which is just a little 90-minute morsel, which is all about attachment and connection and kavacha. If you've never heard that term in yoga, holy cow, this has been mind blowing to me, kavacha. But then that sets us up is this kind of a little bite size appetizer for my May training that I do every year with the Minded Institute on yoga therapy for mental health for children and adolescents. And that's in May. It's 6 sessions. Thank you, Aaron. That's now in the chat. Um, it's 6 sessions, Fridays and Saturdays, and it's based in UK time, so you can do the calculation for yourself here in the States if you're here in the States. But
Because I just so that everybody knows, her talk is also recorded. So if you cannot attend, you can definitely attend at another time. Michelle, I just wanted to make sure because, yeah, you can
yeah,
have access to it. And
yeah,
if you attend, you still get the recording.
yeah. I am so excited about tomorrow's talk. Super excited because it feels like, Anne was saying this, that when we write a book, um, as soon as it leaves your hands, you're like, oh, there's these 5 things I should have put in there. So a lot of that ends up spilling out into the trainings I'm doing. So the art of connection gets what I and we didn't get to say in the book.
Yes. So I I have another topic, but I'm afraid it's too long for us to explore at this time.
Well, why don't you just say it? That way we
Well,
can
I was
talk
gonna,
about
I
it.
just because I thought that the fundamental movements were so important. It was so logical. It fit in so well, especially for my work with children, but for everybody. And I was sort of surprised. It was new to me. So,
Yeah.
do you have time just to take a couple of minutes to talk about that?
I will say that it was the thing that was so exciting and also so experimental for us to do that. Aaron's just put my website in the chat, so please take a look at that. Um, and you'll notice the name of my company is Rhythms Yoga Training. Now you know why. But exactly, like the fundamental movements help us look at how we start moving before we are even born, when we're in that fetal position. And if you think about the sun salutation, it's essentially an expression of the five fundamental movements, or six, depending on how you look at it. And if it weren't for like working at Children's, where I worked on a creative arts therapy team, and I had a dance movement therapy, actually, I did an internship with one of the dance movement therapy professors. And that's how I found out about something called the Kestenberg movements, which is very complex. And that's why I wanted to find something simpler. And the fundamental movements is that. And Ayala, who is a dancer and former dancer, she had also known about it. So for us, we're like, oh, yeah, this is low hanging fruit. Um, but I'm so glad that it makes so much sense to you. So we actually had a pilot. We gathered a bunch of our students and we did a pilot while writing the book with some trainees to see, hey, does this make sense to you? And we taught them about the fundamental movements, and that was great fun. It was also too much, but it was great fun. Yeah. But we can talk more about it in the Q&A for sure.
All right, good. I have personally I have tons more questions, but I know we'll want to give other people a chance to ask some questions. So I guess we'll segue into, I don't know, you have any final thoughts for our whole group before we segue into our Q&A section?
Just this is such an incredible form that Rachel and Shawnee have created. And one thing that we were talking about is that please come whenever possible, please come to these live interviews. However, all of them are recorded. And please, please, please make sure to make comments, because there's these just incredible books that women are writing about yoga therapy, and we really want to promote them and show love. So please go back and watch the other recordings and make comments about Louise's book. Her interview was a few months ago. So that's my last.
I do want to take this opportunity to mention our next yoga therapy book club event is going to be April 29th with our own Sherry, who's right here. Give us a wave, Sherry, so everyone knows who you are. And her book is called From Bodily Knowledge to Intuitive Movement,
And
which is
Sherry,
beautiful.
she is such a wise woman. She is a poet and has decades of lived and clinical experience. So please come
Yeah, so we're
learn from
looking forward
Sherry.
to that on April 29th. That's also a Tuesday.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you have a sample exercise that you want to offer our viewers?
Yes, and I believe that is now in the chat. Erin is on it. Oh, that's a Women's Writers Collective. So the offering that I have, I believe, is for our Q&A folks.
Okay,
And
was
this
there
is
something?
based on connection, what all I was just talking about. So there's both a PDF and a video. But if you go to if you do go to my website or my YouTube channel, I have a YouTube channel called Rhythms Yoga Therapy. Um, you can get in contact with me. Just reach me through my website. I have a ton of videos that you can watch, and I have a little collection called Bite Size Yoga Therapy, and those are phenomenal. Oh, Erin has put that playlist in the chat. So Bite Size Yoga Therapy, it's a playlist that I've curated, but there's a bunch of stuff on my YouTube channel, and so you can find that all there. So that's my offering for all y'all. And then I have a special offering for those of you who are staying for a Q&A.